Roger Williams, pioneer for the separation between church and state in America, is known as the first American in tribute to his institution of the principle of freedom of the mind, soul, and body for his Commonwealth. Williams' Christian beliefs led him to voice his strong opinions about government and religion, which resulted in his banishment in 1635. Fleeing theocracy, he established Providence, Rhode Island, founded on the ideas of popular sovereignty and religious freedom. This turning point was the first initiation of the separation of church and state in America. Roger Williams and his wife Mary set sail on the ship Lion in December 1630 from Bristol, England. Just a year prior, 1,000 like-minded Puritans arrived in Massachusetts to settle there. As they left England, Governor John Winthrop reminded them of their purpose, stating they'd establish a city upon a hill, dedicated to God, obeying God's laws, and thriving in God's image. Winthrop called Captain John Pierce to resupply the starving, death-tolled plantation. It was upon Pierce's ship that young Williams arrived in Nantasket in February 1631. Governor Winthrop noted Williams' landing as that of a godly minister. Williams, along with his fellow Puritans, came from an England experiencing a period of religious instability. James I and the Anglican Church oppressed the Puritans in response to Puritan aggression against the Anglican Church. James continued programs started by Elizabeth I to visit and colonize the New World. These new colonies provided an outlet to relieve the religious tension that it had been building. The Puritans, discontent with religious circumstances, left for the New World to live the religious lives they so pleased. Roger Williams, now a Cambridge-trained minister and respected theologian, sought the religious freedom denied him in England. He soon discovered, however, that the Bay Colony did not secede from its homeland church, but rather relocated to reform its assemblies according to the model of the New Testament. His separatist views became evident when he refused position as pastor of the Boston Church on the grounds that the congregation was an unseparated people. Williams preached in Salem and Plymouth. Soon after, he took a stance against the residence oath, claiming that for a magistrate to apply an oath to a regenerate person was thereby to
have common with a wicked man into the worship of God, and cause him to take the name of God in vain.
He also spoke out against the theocracy by charging that magistrates had no right to punish those who broke any of the first of the 10 Commandments, to
deal with the matters of conscience and religion.
The General Court summoned Williams several times for his beliefs and in response to his continued public teaching of his controversied opinions. After his renouncement of ties to the churches of the Bay Colony, he was summoned to the court in October 1635, which hoped to look over his opinions and convince him of error. Williams, however, was ready for his views to be
not only bound and banished, but also to die in New England, as for most holy truths of God in Jesus Christ.
Next day, the following sentence banished Williams. Whereas Mr. Roger Williams, one of the elders of the Church of Salem, hath broached and divulged divers new and dangerous opinions against the authority of magistrates, as also writ ires of defamation, both of the magistrates and churches here, and that before any conviction, and yet maintaineth the same without retraction. It is therefore ordered that the said Mr. Williams shall depart out of this jurisdiction within 6 weeks now next ensuing. Way, if he neglect to perform, it shall be lawful for the governor and 2 of the magistrates to send him to some place out of this jurisdiction, and not to return any more without license from the court. John Winthrop and some of the other ministers respected Williams and considered him a good and godly man who had fallen into error. They particularly feared his public teaching would undermine the settlement's foundations of social order and assault institutions in a way which would bring the settlement into disfavor in England. The theocracy established called for a homogeneity which would uphold the idea of a city upon a hill and ensure the settlement's success. Its leaders believed that the state must enforce all of God's laws and that to do so, it must prevent error in religion. Williams, however, came to believe that because humans were innately sinful, society built upon such a principle would lead to hypocrisy and the corruption of the church as it dealt with the state's errors. Williams, as with the 19 men banished before him, was excommunicated for the purpose of preventing the settlement from falling into sin and anarchy. Soon after his banishment, Williams became extremely ill. The authorities allowed him to remain in Salem until spring, as long as he did not work to gather followers. Word reached Boston that he was holding meetings in his home with some of his passionate supporters. In January 1636, Winthrop warned Williams of a plan to arrest him and send him back to England. Williams left his family in Salem and, along with several of his followers, fled into the harsh New England winter. While at Plymouth, Williams had befriended the Indians, earning a living by trading with them. Fluent in the native tongue and familiar with the Indian trails, he trekked to Mount Hope and took refuge there. In June, he left the Wampanoags and crossed the Seekonk River into the Narragansetts territory. From his Sachem friends, Miantonomi and Conicus, he acquired land and named it Providence.
Having a sense of God's merciful providences unto me in my distress, I called the place Providence. I desired it might be for a shelter for persons distressed for conscience.
With the help of his followers and with the encouragement of Winthrop, the settlement began to grow, as his family and friends arrived. The town was formally incorporated in 1637 with William's drafting of their Compact of Incorporation. Unlike Massachusetts' Compact, it did not propose to build a model of God's kingdom on earth, and unlike the founding documents of every other European settlement in North and South America, it did not ask for God's blessing. The Compact didn't even mention God at all, but it did state that
all such orders or agreements shall be made for public good, only in civil things.
The settlement, unlike the others of English possession, didn't establish a church or require church attendance. In 1643, Williams traveled to England to obtain an English charter which would officially recognize Rhode Island. When Williams arrived, issues leading to civil war in Parliament prevented him from receiving the charter until May 14, 1644, 10 months later. The patent, just like Massachusetts, granted Rhode Island the right to self-government. It took until 1647, however, for the other 4 Rhode Island towns to agree to unite under the charter. The other colonies were disgusted by Rhode Island. Orthodox men in Massachusetts called Rhode Island's population the Lord's debris. Massachusetts refused to join Rhode Island into the Confederation of New England colonies formed in 1643 for protection against the natives. In response to Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Plymouth voicing claims to parts of Rhode Island territory, Williams and Newport's John Clark went to England to obtain a second charter. Finally, after the overthrowing of the Puritan Parliament, Charles II granted the Charter of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. This charter defined Rhode Island's boundaries and established religious freedom, remaining in force until after the Dorr Rebellion of 1842.
That our royal will and pleasure is, that no person within the said colony at any time hereafter shall be any wise molested, punished, disquieted, or called into question for any difference in opinion in matters of religion, and do not actually disturb the civil peace of our said colony, but that all and every time, and at all times hereafter, freely and fully, have and enjoy his and their own judgments and consciences in matters of religious concernments.
Rhode Island proved to be a beacon for Roger Williams' concept of soul liberty. It was the only colony that took in Quakers or Jews. In contrast, Massachusetts hung 4 Quakers, Virginia imprisoned dozens of Baptists, and Maryland, originally created as a haven for Roman Catholics, came to outlaw Catholic priests and forbade Catholics from inheriting property. Besides religious freedom, it also was founded on democratic ideas. Election by ballot was introduced, and the government was held by free and voluntary consent of all the free inhabitants. Williams' ideas about separation of church and state and religious tolerance stemmed from his idea of the freedom of conscience. Every person has a conscience which gives them the ability to determine right and wrong. Forced religion only infringes upon the freedom of conscience and corrupts the way to salvation and the sincerity of the worship. Although Williams preached tolerance, he did not profess that all religious ideas were of merit. He did, however, believe that God was sovereign and the ultimate judge of religious error. Jesus' death on the cross told us that all men could equally share in his love and the privileges of his word. Christ taught clearly that people should not force others to believe in him or to act righteously, nor destroy those who did not follow his word properly. Roger Williams, a man of great faith and a powerful diplomat and politician in Rhode Island, implemented his ideas to create radical change in his society. His works, banishment, and efforts to create peace are a testament to his determination to change the way in which church and state would interact. Providence was the cornerstone of Williams' legacy, creating a safe haven for mutual respect and tolerance. It led by example, laying the foundation for soul liberty in Rhode Island and setting the precedent for all of America.
God requireth not a uniformity of religion to be enacted and enforced in any civil state which enforced uniformity, sooner or later, is the greatest occasion of civil wars. It is the willing command of God that a permission of the most paganish, Jewish, or anti-Christian consciences and worships be granted to all men in all nations and countries.